Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. My guest today is a registered dietitian with PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and she's going to be talking about how we can eat to beat breast cancer a bite at a time. Please welcome Lee Crosby. It's nice to see you again.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you, Chef AJ. I'm honored.
Yes, it's long overdue. Why are you so interested in breast cancer?
Well, there are a lot of reasons. First, I had my own I didn't have breast cancer, but I had my own kind of near drive-by with breast cancer that got my attention. And that was actually the thing that got me eating plant-based in the first place. Like, fun fact, I thought eating plant-based was crazy. Shh.
How long ago was that?
Oh boy, 2010. I don't know if you want me to share my whole story, but it was an interesting way to come around to this.
Well, I'd love for you to share as much of it as you want. And was this before or after you became a dietitian?
This is before, although I've always kind of been in that vein. My career path is long and confusing, and I was in medical school there for a couple weeks. I knew pretty quickly, I was like, oh, this is not the right way for me to be going. But so it's been interesting. So, all right, in that case, I was going to talk about this in my slides, but I might just jump into it now because you don't need the slide for me to tell my story. So this was okay, you asked 2010, right? My doctor found some suspicious spots in my left breast, and a biopsy showed they were benign, but that I had some higher risk for cancer down the road. But then when I actually went to see a breast surgeon, given that information, she found a thickened area in my right breast, thickened, right? Ugh, that she wanted to keep an eye on. So I'm not really good at just watching and waiting. So I wanted to do just everything I could to reduce my future risk. So after just tons of research, reading the literature, I had a science background. I was a biology major undergrad. I couldn't unsee the data, and I transitioned to a plant-based diet. And it's interesting. So what happened when they found that thickened area was that she wanted me to get a follow-up every 3 months, right? That makes sense. Like clinical breast exam every 3 months to make sure it wasn't changing. So I got, and I sort of transitioned onto a plant-based diet. In the first 3 months, I went back and there was no change at all. It's like, okay, great. After the next 3 months, went back, no change at all. I'm feeling real good now. Next 3 months, I went back, no change at all. I'm like, I got this. And then it's a long story, and I fell precipitously off the wagon. We're talking going back to eating, meat and not doing much exercise. And I actually didn't even go back at my year checkup. I went back 4 months. So it was a year and a month later. And in that 4 months that I had been off plan, the area in my breast that had been totally stable to that point had doubled in size. So within a week, I was getting a lumpectomy, and the results came back atypical, right? So kind of on their way to cancer, but not there yet. So that was a huge wake-up call for me. I got right back to eating plant-based. And I eventually, at that point, that was the trigger that I went back to school to finish out my coursework to become a registered dietitian, having really personally experienced the power of nutrition. And since that surgery, it's been 9 years and counting. So knock on wood, so far, everything is looking good. But it's a very personal, this is personal. It's personal for me.
Did you feel better though when you were on a plant-based diet, even though you might not have experienced changes in your health that you were able to quantify at that time?
Oh, yeah. And can I also say that, so I don't know if this is the experience of many women or not, but my husband decided he was going to come along with me for moral support, right? So first he was just going to do it at home and then eat whatever he wanted when he was out and about. I mean, he's from Dallas, so meat's like a sport. Eating meat is like a sport in Texas. So for him to do that was big. And then he kind of got this, it was funny. It was almost like a macho thing. Like, I can do this. This isn't hard. I'm going to do it all the time. So he did it all the time. And he lost I lost about 10 pounds along the way. So I was like, oh, I'm back in my high school weight. This is kind of fun. He lost 25 pounds. This was in his early 30s. He already had pre-hypertension, and that went away. So his blood pressure normalized. And I mean, it was just, he was sailing along. So now here we both are on the wagon, just hanging out.
Fantastic.
So yeah, it was nice.
How did you get affiliated with PCRM?
Oh gosh. Well, when I was doing a lot of that research at first, a lot of it was in the academic journals, but then of course I went on Google too, and PCRM just kept coming up. I'm like, what is this Physicians Committee? They're really into nutrition. So I read a lot of their material. And of course I'm a very skeptical person. So I would then I live near the National Library of Medicine, and free with your tax dollars. Any person who pays taxes can go get a library card for the National Library of Medicine over at NIH. So I went over there and pulled the studies. So it was an interesting time, but that was how I got involved with them. And then I actually found out that someone I had worked for briefly had actually been a dietitian with Physicians Committee. I'd been a research assistant for her, and I had no idea she ate plant-based. Dr. Bree Turner McGreevy. And when I went back and was going through some of PCRM's resources, I saw that she taught one of their classes. And I was like, Bree taught one of your classes, Physicians Committee. So that was like a nice little serendipitous moment also that connected me. So then in my mid 30s, I decided I wanted to go do an internship with Physicians Committee. It was great. So there I was in my mid 30s as like the little intern, but I saw an amazing organization. I was like, yeah, this is a place. This is a place I can see myself.
That's fantastic. And you actually see patients, like you can do consultations, right? At the Barnard Medical Center? I
do. Yeah. So I can see patients in actually a number of different states, thanks to telehealth having become what it is. So here, DC, Maryland, Virginia, I'm licensed. Well, you don't have to be licensed in Virginia as a dietitian, but licensed the other two. I can see patients in Virginia. I can see patients in California, Florida, and honestly, a couple of Kentucky and maybe another state or two. So it's on the Barnard Medical Center website. But yeah, so barnardmedical.org. I sure can, as can some of the other dietitians in the practice with me.
That's so cool. What about internationally? Can you see them virtually if they live, let's say, outside of the United States?
I don't think so. I don't think licensure wise I can do that. I'd have to go and check with legal, but I'm pretty sure I can't, unfortunately. Sorry.
No, just sometimes I get a request for people wanting to see a plant-based dietitian, but they live in other countries. So
yeah.
Okay, cool.
So there are getting to be more and more of us, which is great. Can I say completely unrelated things? It ties into patient care. Because so one of the clients that I saw, I mentioned, did it come up? He mentioned your podcast. And I was like, oh gosh, I'm going to be on Chef AJ soon. He's like, what? Did you know that she can play the nose flute? And I was like, I'm sorry. What?
She's can, but I don't. Yeah, no, I long time ago, I was on the Johnny Carson show. That's on my
multi-talented. I watched that. I was dying with laughter. I was like, I am like even more honored than ever to go on the show.
That was a long time ago.
Oh, I was just so impressed.
Thank you.
You're so great.
Well, everybody at PCRM, it's just the most wonderful organization. I was saying that Dr. Barnard was on about a week ago, and it's just I mean, he's amazing. It's like you send him an email before you even hit send. It's like he's written back. It's
unbelievable. I don't know. I mean, I eat a healthy plant-based diet and I have pretty good energy, but that guy, rocket fuel. I mean, he's all go and just amazing. It's incredible. I don't know how he does it.
He's so kind. I always said if there was a president of vegan, that it should be him.
The president of vegan. I'll let him know that you said that. He'd appreciate it. So I also have lots to share about breast cancer in terms of reducing risk. If you like that,
I would love it because, it's such a timely topic and, women are concerned about it. It can affect men too, though. I actually have a friend who has breast cancer. He's a man and he doesn't, men in general don't go for yearly mammograms or even mammograms at all necessarily.
Yeah, no, there are less than 1% of cases, as I recall, but that doesn't mean that there are no percent of cases. So yes, absolutely. Men can get breast cancer. So if you're a gentleman out there and you feel something a little funny, please go get it checked. Don't wait, just go get it checked.
Because I know it's very controversial in the plant-based world as to whether or not a woman should even have mammograms. Some of the plant-based doctors say yes, some say no. So
yeah. I think the data is pretty solid that the benefits outweigh the risk when it comes to that. I do know that there's some controversy, but I'm just from the data I've seen, I personally go and get them, but with the understanding that there is a little bit of risk associated with them. Absolutely. I mean,
but there are other ways, like I forget what it's called, but thermography, is that?
Thermography, the data on it's not terribly strong, but sonography is another way. So a clinical breast exam and a sonogram, if someone is just like, oh gosh, I'm definitely not getting a mammogram, like, okay, well, why don't you just go get the clinical exam, get the sonogram and start there. Like that's a sort of zero risk way to go about it.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, you wanted to share some slides?
I do have slides. Okay. Yeah. Hold on. Oh boy, this always tests my technical know-how. You'd think by now I would be like all over Zoom. All right, here we go. I gotcha. Okay. Can y'all see that slide with my story? Aww. That's my little old hubby. Okay. But I'm going to back up a couple of slides. Here we go. Okay. So the campaign that we run at Physicians Committee is called Let's Beat Breast Cancer. And it is kind of what it sounds like. We all know the statistics. I put them up here that in her lifetime, 1 in 8 women is going to be diagnosed with breast cancer. But I like to add this to it. The other 7 are going to worry about it, right? Whether you know someone who has it or you're at risk of having it, or you've had it yourself and you're worried about a recurrence, like it's in everyone's lives. So what do we do about it? At Physicians Committee, we launched and we talked about we launched a program called Let's Beat Breast Cancer. And this is actually in conjunction with, I call her breast cancer surgeon to the stars, Dr. Christy Funk. So she's worked with, I believe, Sheryl Crow and Angelina Jolie, and to set up this, and of course, this other gentleman who needs no introduction, Dr. Neil Barnard. So we put together an educational campaign that's 4 evidence-based lifestyle steps that women can follow to reduce their risk. And I do want to say this, and I just think this is so important because sometimes blame gets thrown around, that you can do everything like quote unquote right and still end up with a diagnosis of breast cancer. None of this is a guarantee like, oh, but I did all these things so I won't get a diagnosis. Like, it doesn't quite work that way. Early life exposures and genes and all these things, we just don't know. But it just want to make sure that that's on there, but that's not to say that there's nothing we can do to reduce our risk, because there sure is. So it's like getting in a car, right? You're going to put on your seatbelt. Could something terrible still happen? Yeah, it's just less likely if you put on that seatbelt. So we have a really cool advisory board. We've got experts in their field. We got scientists, we got physicians, we got influencers, we got some celebrities up there. I mean, come on, we got Tracy and Jon Stewart, we got Tig Notaro. So we have a lot of people backing us, more than 50 partner organizations and companies, 250 healthcare providers helping spread the word about these 4 risk reduction steps. And that's what I really want to delve into today, are those risk reduction steps. So what are the 4 steps? Okay, here's the too long didn't read version, right? Choosing healthful plant-based foods, staying active, limiting alcohol, I'm so sorry, and aiming for a healthy weight. And because I'm a dietitian, I'm just going to sit here and like dive deep on step 1, and we'll talk briefly about steps 2 through 4, but where I'm going to get nerdy is going to be on the food. So let's talk food. And Chef AJ, if you have any questions or something where you're like, hey, wait a second, please.
There was one question from Dina. When you were getting your breast checked every 3 months for the thickening, she was wondering what mechanism did they use to check?
That was clinical breast exam and sonography.
Thank you.
Yep. So they were just trying to make sure that there was no change. And then after that, they didn't even do a mirror because they could feel it. They just went right in and took it out. When something changes that quickly, I guess they don't mess around with it. I mean, doubled in size. It was a special, not fun time. All right. Choosing healthful plant-based foods. There are 2 prongs to this, right? We call it the 4-pronged approach for the 4 steps. But when you're talking plant-based, and I know, Chef AJ, that most of your viewers and listeners, they already are doing this, but replacing the animal products and then eating a diet rich in whole plant foods. So I kind of want to talk about why replacing the animal products, and then some of the really neat stuff with the whole plant foods, because there's just some neat compounds and things that are protective. So first, let's talk animal products. So we have some pretty good data that red and processed meat, high fat dairy, and eggs are all linked to breast cancer risk. So I kind of want to go through those 3 because those are the biggies. Okay, red meat and breast cancer. So first thing I want to talk about, this is a study of about 88,000 women, and they found a dose response relationship with red meat, right? So for every serving per day, there was a 13% higher risk of breast cancer. So basically, meat's not good for you, but it's really not good for you when you're in your teen and preteen years. And this kind of got my concern because my grandpa, one of his side hobbies was raising beef cattle. So we ate a lot of beef growing up. But at the time we thought it was healthy. But high red meat intake in adolescents is actually linked to a 43% higher risk of premenopausal breast cancer, right? Some of those sort of more aggressive cancers in younger women. So if you have a daughter or a niece or a granddaughter and you would like them to have a lower risk of breast cancer, maybe nudge them in the direction of not eating red meat. Okay, what about dairy, right? Biological purpose of milk. Anyone know the biological purpose of milk? Ooh, Chef AJ.
Oh, for the baby to grow. Well, in the case of a cow, for a baby calf to grow to like 800 pounds in a year.
Thank you. Yes, 80 to 800 pounds, right? That's like not the rate of weight gain that most of us are going for. And it's also not the rate of cell growth that we want. So just keeping that in mind, it's really interesting to me that the data are mixed when it comes to dairy and breast cancer. They're finding higher risk with dairy. Some studies find lower risk with dairy. Some find no relationship at all. So and in 2018, the World Cancer Research Fund actually found like limited suggestive data that low-fat dairy might be linked to lower breast cancer risk. So my head's kind of exploding when I see that, because I'm thinking, but wait, there's all this stuff going on in dairy. It's got saturated fat and estrogen. Oh, that's a giveaway. It's linked to IGF-1. I think a lot of what's going on with some of these studies is confounding. Are you familiar with that?
No, talk about it just in case.
Okay. So basically, when you're doing a study, you're trying to like, okay, what's the relationship between dairy and breast cancer? And you're trying to limit it just to that. But the problem is, I don't know about you growing up, but I was taught that like dairy was good, right? I was supposed to drink my 3 glasses of milk a day and grow up big and strong. And the Got Milk campaign and all the crazy mustaches. And so people thought that was healthy, and they still do. And so, I mean, it's in the dietary guidelines, which we're working on that. But so because that's how it's viewed, it's got a health halo, right? People think it's a healthy food. So healthier people are going to be consuming more low-fat dairy. And while they can try to control for some lifestyle variables, you can't control for everything. So I think that is sort of a residual confounder, that the reason low-fat dairy is linked to lower breast cancer risk is because healthy people in general are consuming more low-fat dairy because they think it's healthy, and they're doing all these other healthy things. That's my hypothesis. That said, not every study finds that. And this is some newer data from 2020. And they found that there was a 50% increase in risk in breast cancer for those consuming the most dairy milk versus those comparing the least. And that if you took the dairy milk and replaced it with soy milk, the breast cancer risk decreased. So for all those reasons, I think dairy is not a great choice when it comes to breast health. And I talked about the IGF-1. Are you familiar with that one? Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, insulin-like growth factor. Again, it's found in cow's milk, but more importantly, everything that's in cow's milk makes your body produce more of its own. It is, like it says, a growth factor, right? So if you were to put breast cancer cells in a test tube and IGF-1 in there and stir it up, it would be like a party in the tube for the cancer cells. And again, we have some data that if a woman or a man drinks about 3 glasses of milk a day, or the equivalent in other dairy products, they see about a 10% rise in the amount of IGF-1 in their bloodstream. So that's just another good reason to me to be like, let's just pass. Let's pass on the dairy.
What about that A2 milk that people are thinking is so good for them?
No, as far as I know, I don't know a ton about A2 milk, but I don't think there's any difference in terms of whether it would trigger your body to produce IGF-1 or not, because it's the combination of everything that's in milk that triggers that increase. So I can't imagine that because one of the proteins is a little bit different, that's going to make a difference.
It's so funny, Lee, that people are afraid to have soy, but they're not afraid to eat animal products.
Oh boy, I know, because you're like, oh, there might be a phytoestrogen, which we're of course going to talk about. Not that you have to eat soy, but it's in terms of breast health, the data is really strong that it reduces risk. But there's actual mammal estrogen in dairy milk, like a lot of it, and more in the modern era than there ever was in the past, because we milk cows really deep into their pregnancies when their estrogen levels are sky high. So, wow, people who worry about like, oh, there might be a phytoestrogen, there's like practically, the exact same estrogen that, a woman's body and to a lesser extent, men's bodies crank out, like in the milk, just right there in the aisle. No one's talking about it. Okay. Rant complete. Moving on. We do have some good data in terms of high fat dairy. No one's really questioning this one. This is data from the Life After Cancer epidemiological study looking at people who have breast cancer. And for people who ate about a serving of high fat dairy per day, they were 50% more likely to have died from their cancer, specifically after about 11, 12 years, I think was the follow-up period. So I'm of the belief that if something is good for the goose, it's bad for the gander, and vice versa. So if someone who has breast cancer is more likely to die from it when they're eating high fat dairy, I'm not going to go out and have a bowl of ice cream. Let's put it that way. Why might this happen? Saturated fat is linked with breast cancer specific mortality. These numbers are, again, these are significant. Those who ate the most saturated fat had a 51% higher risk of dying from breast cancer specifically compared to those who ate the least. Top 5 sources of saturated fat in the US diet. All right, Chef AJ, you got to give me at least one of these. Saturated fat, top source, US diet. What do you think?
Oh, it's got to be cheese, I'm guessing.
Oh, well, yep. Nice. Any other thoughts while we're on the subject?
Well, I mean,
it's tricky. I didn't tell you there'd be a pop quiz.
Well, I mean, I know there's saturated fat in coconut oil, and maybe that's in things.
That's number 3. There it is.
Oh, I didn't realize how much was in beef. Wow.
Yeah, beef is the other one. Milk, like, actual drinking 2% milk and whole milk, and then processed meats. So the hot dogs, the sausage, all that stuff. Those are the top 5 sources in the US diet. So those are things it's really good just to go ahead and steer clear of. A word about eggs. The risk is not enormously increased, but it's there. So this data that you're seeing, this comes from a big meta-analysis, which I think is so funny because it just means like big analysis. So it's just a study of other studies. And it was back in 2015. And they basically found that consuming more than 5 eggs or more per week, so not even an egg a day, 4% higher risk of breast cancer. 9 eggs a week's a little more than an egg a day, 9% higher risk. So not huge numbers, but not something where I'm going to let's go have an omelet. No. This was also interesting to me, 29% higher risk of breast cancer in those who had the highest versus the lowest cholesterol intake, specifically, not blood cholesterol, but cholesterol in the diet, and eggs are very much a top source of that. So, and part of the reason that saturated fat is an issue. Well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. It's really interesting. And Dr. Greger actually has a great video on it. And I'm just going to be a spoiler, is looking at oxidized cholesterol in the body, that it can actually also potentially drive breast cancer growth. So another reason to keep your cholesterol at healthy levels, keep the saturated fat and the dietary cholesterol out of there. Okay. Oh, I didn't ring it. Oh, I did. We're going to get to it. I'm sorry. I was looking through these yesterday and I just kept adding. So I was like, oh, that's a fun study. Like, oh, this is good. So apologies if you see me get to a slide, be like, oh yeah, we're so excited. Okay. But this is the most fun part, I think. And I mean, Chef AJ, this is what you do. So this is the whole plant foods side of the equation. Again, I think it's much more fun, but of course we got to do the, why are we doing this science-wise? Cool study. This was 69,000, more than that, participants in the Adventist Health Study 2. And basically they looked at folks for a little more than 4 years. And of those 69,000, there were about 2,900 people who got cancer. And obviously they were not all breast cancers. And what they found was that there was a 16% lower risk for getting any kind of cancer for people who are following a vegan diet versus standard diet. And there was a 34% decreased risk for female-specific cancer. So that's lumping together ovarian, uterine, and breast cancers. And then also for the gentlemen in the audience, 35% decreased risk of prostate cancer. So it's interesting. Most of the things I'm talking about with breast cancer also apply to prostate cancer. Just fun fact. So again, for the men out there, A, you can get breast cancer, so pay attention. And B, this is also probably applicable to your prostate. Okay, a little bit more. These studies are relatively new and a little bit perplexing, but I wanted to put them in because, science is science. Okay, plant forward diets. So none of these are diets that are looking at fully vegan, much less whole food plant-based, but they're looking at people who eat more plants. So there are 3 different countries that I found studies for. In Iran, the highest plant-based diet index, so people who are eating more plants, less animals, they had a 67% lower odds of getting breast cancer. Interestingly, though, the people who had the highest healthy PDI score actually were a little less, quote unquote, protected. And I think part of that might be is people who are eating a healthy plant-based diet already may already be at risk. Just a thought. But again, this is why I say it's a little perplexing. I'd like to do some deeper digging, but I still wanted to include them. This is what also got my attention. Some people think, well, I'm vegan, I'm covered. It's like, okay, you're vegan. That's awesome for animals and that's awesome for the planet. And parts of it are awesome for your health. But if you're eating just soda and potato chips, like they're looking here, those with the highest unhealthy plant-based diet index score. So again, those like chips and soda folks, they had more than twice the risk of getting breast cancer as the sort of baseline person who's just eating a standard diet. So eating vegan is good for a lot of things, but you got to step it up and eat those healthier foods if you want to reduce your breast cancer risk. Spain, a moderate pro-vegetarian, I love these terms. I don't know why, they just crack me up. Diet is linked to a lower risk of breast cancer. But again, it was that same pattern of people who are eating like more intensely pro-vegetarian, but still eating animal products and stuff. They didn't see a statistically significant relationship, but I think that might also be because the numbers were too low. I'm not sure on that one. And then in France, they didn't see any relationship at all with again, everyone has to call it something different, pro plant-based diet score with breast cancer, but there was a link to total digestive and lung cancers. So it may just be that the link's not strong enough, that there are too many confounders. So just really neat stuff to keep an eye on moving forward. But I just wanted to put that in there, that in general, eating more plant-based is linked to lower breast cancer risk and overall cancer risk. Okay, why, right? I mean, well, in individual like types of foods, food groups, we know studies have found that whole grains, fruits, vegetables, legumes, and nuts, those are all linked with lower breast cancer risk. And I don't think that probably comes as a surprise to anyone here. They're high in fiber, especially soluble fiber. Chef AJ, you probably know all about soluble fiber and estrogen. Do you want to just fill this part in for me?
Well, I mean, it's all in plants and, oats and vegetables and fruit. Yes. I mean, it's very hard to not get enough fiber on a plant-based diet unless you're on a junk food plant-based diet.
That's right. Yeah. Don't have an unhealthy plant-based diet index. That can be your takeaway for the day. But really, yeah. Insoluble fiber, what it does is it binds to the excess estrogen and cholesterol that your body's trying to get rid of in your gastrointestinal tract and escorts it out of the body. It keeps you from reabsorbing your waste cholesterol. That's a good thing. And that's important. I come back to cholesterol because that's the basis of the estrogen molecule. All right. So they're high in fiber. They're low in fat. The data on fat overall is a little bit, is it linked to increased breast cancer risk? Some studies say yes, some say no. But we know the saturated fat piece is certainly linked. And most of the plant foods, exceptions of, avocado and nuts and seeds, are low in fat. And even the nuts and seeds are generally, with the exception of like coconut and macadamias and palm oil, the other ones tend to be low in saturated fat. And they're high in the vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals. And these are the ones that are just super fun if you have any kind of like biology curiosity or just want to, get nerdy. So I have a fave 5 foods for breast health, and I struggle and I swap something out of this list frequently because there are so many good plant foods for reducing breast cancer risk. But these are my current fave 5. This is subject to change as new data comes in. Okay. Soy foods, the whole less processed ones, cruciferous vegetables. Those are like your cabbage family veggies, right? Your broccoli and your broccoli sprouts, and your kale, your collard greens. Fun fact, and Chef, you probably already know this, but cruciferous veggies are named because their flowers are shaped like a cross, hence cruciferous. I just thought that was the coolest thing when I learned it. Nori? Yes, nori. We'll get to that. Mushrooms and sweet potatoes. Okay, let's talk tofu. All right. So, sorry, I really...
Glad, because there's a question about it right now from Mary, because she says she's confused about soy and tofu.
Oh my gosh. Well, you are in the right place. And if I don't answer it, put another question in the chat that I can't see, but I know you can. So, and I'll tackle it. Okay. So first things first, research is very clear. Women who consume more soy are less likely to get breast cancer. And just a few studies here. Well, one study and then some meta-analyses, big analyses. All right. 1 cup of soy milk or half cup of tofu daily is linked to a 30% lower risk of breast cancer. It's a 2008 study. Now, these are some of the studies of studies, right? And if these find something, that means there's really something there, because a lot of times when there is something there, it kind of disappears when you shove everything together in a big pool. But in this case, they found that the highest risk of isoflavones, and those are those phytoestrogens that people are worried about, from diet, not from a supplement, from diet, had a 32% lower risk of breast cancer. And again, that's looking at 22 different studies. And then just another one that people are familiar with, I think most people have heard in this nutrition space, of the Women's Healthy Eating and Living study. Survivors who eat the most soy, so women who've already had their diagnosis, and this is where a lot of people are afraid to eat soy, women who've have cancer and eat the most soy, cut their recurrence of risk in half. So I think that's if you had any concerns about eating soy, this should put those at ease. The question is, okay, well, why? Like, does soy have some kind of voodoo magic wand for breast cells? No, kind of. I mean, okay, so those isoflavones, or the phytoestrogens, they're actually protective. So, and here's how this works, because this used to confuse me too. So we have 2 kinds of receptors that basically are like catcher's mitts, right, for estrogen molecules. on breast cells. There's an alpha one and a beta one. So I've got the blur on. You can't see. I'm like, I always gesture. Okay. Alpha and beta. You don't need to see my target print on the wall behind me. So the alpha receptor is what your natural estrogen binds to. And I think of alpha as the accelerator, right? It tells cells to grow. It tells things to get moving, make more cells. Then that's what your natural estrogen preferentially binds to. Then there's the beta receptor. And I think of it as the brakes. It's the slow down receptor. And guess which receptor that the soy isoflavones bind to more strongly? It's the beta one. So it looks a little bit like estrogen, these protective isoflavones, but they bind to the receptor that tells cells to slow down. You don't need to grow right now. Just lay back and chill. So that's why these things that look a little bit like estrogens and soy actually can have protective effects. And fun fact, this actually also happens in the prostate too. The more you know. Do you guys remember those? The more you know. Okay, moving on. Also, simple, it displaces meat in the diet and less healthy things. So moving aside all the isoflavones, if you're eating tofu instead of a cheeseburger, well, that's a win. And again, soy may help lower cholesterol. It's a question if it does it of its own volition, or if it, so to speak, or if it just displaces meat. But all that is going to help reduce breast cancer risk. Does that answer the question, or is there more?
She was concerned because she had weight to lose and it was a little bit higher in fat. And I guess some of the other plant-based people said maybe not to include so much of it if you were trying to lose weight.
I mean, I wouldn't eat like straight tofu all the time, but I don't think you'd want to do that anyways. But she's right. For weight loss, you'd want to stick to the least processed. So have some edamame, have whole soybeans. Yeah, they're a little higher in fat, but they're still really high in fiber and plant-based protein and all that cool stuff. So yeah, I wouldn't go too crazy with anything. Although greens in the morning, I heard a rumor that you eat giant salads in the morning. Is that true?
Well, I eat vegetables for breakfast. It's not always salad, but it's often just some cooked greens and,
you're even more hardcore than I am. Okay. Because I always do the breakfast salad with whatever I have. And people look at me like I've sprouted an extra head, like salad at breakfast. It's so good.
When I was working a long time ago as a comedian, actually, in Japan, they served us salad at breakfast. And that was just what everybody got. And they also served us miso soup and rice. Savory breakfasts are the norm in other countries. It's only here that it's caffeine and sugar and flour.
And boy, is it really is. Caffeine, that's a whole nother topic. Maybe we'll get into it. And let me know if I'm just blabbing too much. You can always just kind of.
Yeah, because I know some people are concerned caffeine and chocolate when they have breast cysts to avoid it, things like that. And
well, since we're going down the road. So the data is that, it can actually help with some of the pain, but surprisingly, caffeine intake and coffee intake in particular, not linked with breast cancer risk, really not. But again, you'd want to not be eating your chocolate, for example, in the form of a candy bar, because that's a bar of solid saturated fat, and that is linked with breast cancer risk. Okay. But it can make fibrocystic breast symptoms worse. So if you have fibrocystic breast changes and you don't want to be in pain and all that stuff, and full disclosure, I do have those, and it's super unfun. And the cleaner I eat, the better I feel. So yeah, I would steer clear if that's an issue for you. Okay. Cruciferous vegetables. I think these are close to every plant-based diet person's heart. What's your favorite one, Chef AJ?
Oh, gosh.
We've all got a favorite.
I love broccoli. I can't help it. I just love it.
Oh,
it's my favorite.
Okay. It's good.
But I love Brussels sprouts too. But really, like if I was I don't want to be on a desert island, but I love broccoli. It never disappoints.
That's true. And you can use it in pretty much any way. I feel like it's very versatile. Oh, that's a good point. I was going to say arugula, unless it's grown too late in the year, in which case it's like getting punched in the mouth and I can't deal with it.
Yes, baby arugula tends to be a little bit easier for some people to choke down because it can be a little bit bitter.
Yeah. As long as it's mixed with other stuff, it's great. It's buttery, it's spicy, but oh boy. Yeah. Especially, oh Lordy, I tried to grow it once and it gets hot here fast and nope, it gets spicy in the heat. But anyways, so you're right. Broccoli, collard greens are another favorite of mine from the dietitian standpoint, because they are rocking high in calcium. So I know a lot of people are concerned about that on plant-based diet. So collard greens, like serving of those has about the same calcium as a cup of milk. So collard greens, I'm a big fan of, but all the bok choy and the baby bok choy and the cauliflower and radishes, things you wouldn't always think of. Why are they so cool? Besides being versatile and tasty, glucosinolates. Yes. So, and what's even cooler, so what is that and why does it matter? So those are precursors to some super duper cancer fighting molecules called indoles and isothiocyanates, the most famous one of which is sulforaphane. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's in broccoli. It's in your friend broccoli. And broccoli sprouts, baby broccolis, oh boy, super high in sulforaphane. So if you want to put some broccoli sprouts on a salad, that's awesome in terms of breast health. But there's a caveat with this, and that is that there is actually an enzyme that hangs out in a different part of the cell in these cruciferous veggies that converts those cancer-fighting indoles and isothiocyanates. I'm sorry, the cancer-fighting converts glucosinolates. There's so many syllables here. Converts glucosinolates into the cancer-fighting indoles and isothiocyanates. So the thing is, you have to bring together, you got to marry up the enzyme that converts the glucosinolates into the cancer fighters. And to do that, you need to, a couple things. One is chew, right? So the more you chew, the more you break open the cells and you blend together the parts of the cell that have the enzyme and the stuff that needs to get converted by the enzyme into cancer fighters. So chewing, blending makes a difference. And also, if you cook your food, you've actually denatured the enzyme, which I have no problems with cooked food. I think cooked food is great and I ate a lot of it. But in this case, this is one time you might want to actually eat it raw or lightly steamed, or there is a workaround here where you can mustard seed powder. Mustard powder actually has some of this myrosinase enzyme in it. So you can sprinkle that over your, cooked broccoli or collard greens if you want to make sure that you're getting the full cancer fighting power. Okay, that's pretty nerdy, right? Okay, good. I feel like I've done my job now. Nori, okay, also known as a sea vegetable, which when I was growing up was called seaweed. Now it's a sea vegetable. It's fancy. Why I like it is actually iodine. It's an issue for people on a plant-based diet. I've seen it in the clinic and I've read about it in the literature. Low iodine intake is not just an issue for might you think it would be an issue for? You have any thoughts?
Well, thyroid.
Yeah, right. You'd think it'd be for thyroid health, and it is. But it's also important when it comes to breast health. Low iodine can contribute to fibrocystic breast disease. So if you have fibrocystic breast disease, anyone needs to make sure they're getting enough iodine, but you particularly need to make sure you've got enough if you have fibrocystic breast disease. Okay. Also, it's linked to the risk of some of these metastatic aggressive breast cancers in younger women is inadequate iodine intake. So for breast health, I like people to get enough iodine. We don't need much. 150 micrograms per day. That's not even that's a fraction of a milligram. So 150 micrograms per day is very, very little. Why I like nori so much is it's like the Goldilocks source when it comes to iodine, right? It's like the just right. This is the perfect amount. One sheet of nori, and for those who are uninitiated, that's the wrapper on vegetable sushi, has about 105 micrograms of iodine. That gets you most of the way there, and you're likely getting some iodine from the rest of your food. So it's just, you don't know how much iodine you're getting from the rest of your food because it matters where the food was grown and the iodine content of that soil. Fun gross fact. Most Americans right now they used to get their iodine from iodized salt, which if you're including salt, I know not everyone does, but if you're including salt, that's an excellent source. Please don't use some fancy Himalayan sea, whatever salt. If you're going to use salt, just use good old fashioned iodized salt like your grandma did, because that's an excellent source of iodine. Not that you need to add salt. But if you don't, you need to make sure you're getting your iodine somewhere. Most Americans are getting their iodine from dairy, and most the iodine in dairy comes from the disinfectants that they use on cows' udders, which is kind of gross. So just a little disinfectant along with all the other stuff that's in milk. Sometimes they also add it to the cattle feed, but that's where most Americans are getting it right now. So I think it's great to go ahead and cut the dairy, but you want to make sure you're getting iodine from somewhere. And if you're like, oh, well, I eat salty food at restaurants sometimes, the salt they're using there does not have iodine. Most of the time it does not. So again, you don't need to add salt, but you need to make sure you're getting some sea vegetables. Then some sea vegetables are wildly high in iodine, and you might want to steer clear if you do not already have high intakes, right? So kelp is one of those. I will tell people to be very cautious with kelp unless they've been eating it for a while and they're fine and their thyroid's great, like super. And in Japan, like traditionally iodine intakes are very high, but they're lifetime high. So it's not an issue. If you have thyroid disease, this is a time you want to check with your doc or your nurse practitioner before you change your intake dramatically, because if you have pre-existing thyroid disease, changing around the amount of iodine you get can change your thyroid function.
Edna
So,
wants to know if there is a link between soy and thyroid.
so the link between soy and thyroid is that if you're eating soy, there are some, I want to make sure I'm getting this right. There's I can't remember the name of the constituent in soy that can bind to iodine. So you actually have slightly higher iodine needs if you're eating soy. So if you're having tofu every day, let's make sure you're getting a little bit of sea vegetables in there every day too. So that's the link. It can also, if you're taking thyroid hormone, it can interfere a little bit with absorption of that. But if you're taking thyroid hormone, you should be taking it, for most people, or what you're take it how your doctor tells you. But for most people, they're taking it first thing in the morning and they're waiting at least an hour before they eat anything, which should cover that base. Okay. So, but if she's right in that if you're eating soy, that's awesome. Just make sure you're having a reliable source of iodine in your diet. And again, you can get too much. The tolerable upper level is 1100 micrograms per day. So if you want to get, into some of these seaweeds, you just flip it over or check online and make sure that you're not, getting past that 1100 microgram mark. Although I will say this, in trials, I do not recommend this at home. It's for fibrocystic breast disease. They'll put people on mega doses of iodine to get, improvement in symptoms, but I do not recommend that. I would stick to the RDA, the recommended dietary allowance. Okay, so that covers Nori. Are there more questions?
Yes. Well, first, Annette says she loves your energy, and Evelyn says, must the soy be organic?
Oh, good question. We don't have a ton of data suggesting that it needs to be, but I think thankfully now an awful lot of soy products are organic. Like if you're buying tofu, most of the tofu's on the market. And again, I don't just shop at Whole Foods. Like I shop at some very standard grocery stores. They tend to be organic because people who are eating tofu care, if that makes sense. Like of all the consumers who are going to care whether something is organic, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that tofu consumers are right up there. So I think if you have it accessible to you and you have the means, if it costs extra, I think that's a fine use of food dollars and I would encourage it. But I don't think it needs to be organic to be safe. It's certainly much better to eat conventional soy, because what I have seen truly is that people, they can't find the organic soy, so they go out and have a burger instead because they didn't have anything to cook at home and they didn't want to buy the conventional soy. So they go to a drive-thru. I'm like, oh, wow, there's nothing in that soy that's going to get you the way something in a drive-thru will. Yeah. So good question. If you can, get it. Any other fun questions?
Perfect.
But you're making me want to drink water. This is great. I need someone to keep encouraging me. All right, water break for everyone. All right, any other soy, thyroid type questions?
Well, there's just a question from Glory that I know the answer to.
Oh, well, you answer it then.
Is plant-based foods good for you to lose weight? As long as they're the whole ones, not to the junk food, absolutely. And as long as you're not eating just peanut butter and jelly and bread all day, it's excellent for weight loss.
Yeah, that's not going to be optimal for weight loss, but yes, absolutely. Yeah, I should say, well, this is actually, it's fun that you say that because one of the steps is all about healthy weight. And the fun part about that step is you just have to do the steps prior to it and it happens all by itself. So, all right. Any other questions?
Well, Adina's saying, is it bad that she eats a certain amount of chocolate a day, but she's saying a quarter of one square, but we don't know how big the bar is. And she has it twice after lunch and dinner. So it sounds like it's more than just a square. I can't figure it out if she doesn't tell me ounces, how much.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. That would be like, well, I'd be like, well, does she have chronic health conditions and And I mean, compared to most of America, if that's your big, I have half a square of dark chocolate a day. Like, oh, wow, you are A+. Now in the whole food, plant-based SOS free world, I mean, that's a different, what's your comparison point?
Yeah, exactly.
So that'd be a great question for a plant-based dietitian though. Yes, it would. I mean, in a one-on-one session, you're like, but you are a plant-based dietitian. That's true. But I can't give personalized advice. Not on a podcast. Okay. Unless there's another pressing question, I'm going to scooch on. Okay. And then again, something pops up, interrupt me, please. Heaven knows I could use it. Okay. Mushrooms, they are magical, but not like that. 1 button mushroom a day. This is a cool study and it's only one study. And I know a study does not necessarily a truism make. And that's just a good take home, by the way. A single study is interesting, but not gospel, right? It's interesting. You want to see what multiple studies look like. So as a case control study, which isn't terribly high quality as studies go, a randomized controlled trial is the gold standard, but it's still really cool that the equivalent of 1 button mushroom a day appears to be fairly protective, a 64% decreased risk in breast cancer. And so I was like, all right, I'd seen that. And then when people, if they get the Let's Beat Breast Cancer monthly newsletter, I put research updates in at the very beginning, because at the end of the day, that's what people want, myself included. And this is a recent one. I think, do I have the date up there? Yeah, 2021, this year. Eating more mushrooms, again, big meta-analysis, or I think it was a meta-analysis. It might have been, doesn't matter. It was still a study of lots of studies, linked to a 35% lower risk of breast cancer. The people who ate more, the most mushrooms relative to the least. So, and they think one of the reasons for that is that mushrooms have something called ergothioneine, and that is a powerful antioxidant that helps protect cells and the DNA inside them. They also are rich in a soluble fiber called beta-glucan, which you can find in things like oats and beans. And that fiber itself may have tumor fighting effects, and it may help lower estrogen, just like soluble fibers do. So 2 thumbs up for mushrooms. They also taste amazing.
Could they be like in mushroom powder, or does it have to be mushrooms?
So interesting. That one study with the 64%, they looked also at the equivalent in dried mushrooms, and I want to say it was in the 30-ish% range of protection. So it wasn't as strongly linked, but I don't think it necessarily has to be fresh or fresh cooked. So that said, I would be cautious about any supplement that has an isolate of a single anything out of a food, right? And I look at this in terms of soy. So there are some studies showing that soy isoflavone supplements, where they've taken the soy isoflavones and they've concentrated them into pharmacological doses. Those, I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, actually are linked to breast cancer risk, because even though they, in the food quantities, they preferentially bind to the beta receptor. If you're taking a mega dose of those isoflavones, they can start binding to that alpha receptor too. So again, you're not going to sit down and eat 20 servings of tofu at once, but if you take a supplement that has 20 servings worth of isoflavones in one supplement, that could be an issue. So I like people to get their nutrients when at all possible. Exceptions, B12, vitamin D for people who need it, and maybe iodine if you don't want to eat seaweed and you don't eat salt. I want people getting their nutrients from food in general, unless you have a medical issue that needs them. Okay. And the last one is sweet potatoes. And this last category varies. Sometimes flaxseed. There are all kinds of great foods for breast cancer risk reduction. I felt like there should be a little asterisk here, like sweet potatoes and other carotenoid rich foods, which would include everything that's orange, basically. So butternut squash and cantaloupe, which, oh, wow, we decided to grow cantaloupe this year. And holy moly, I feel like I look really pale, but I should have a carotenoid tan, because honestly, I've eaten so much cantaloupe. I just feel like it should be like oozing out my pores.
Have you ever tried the sugar kiss melon? It's like a guaranteed sweet cantaloupe. It's like
what
I've ever tasted. The only place I've ever seen them is Gelson's and Costco, but they're, you know how sometimes melon is good and sometimes it's not good. This is like guaranteed. It's
always
never
good.
It's called, if you ever can find it, it's called the sugar kiss melon. And it's
basically I want to find it.
Sweet cantaloupe. So
and you said Costco, because I don't have the other place.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Google by you where to find the sugar kiss melon. We have a store here, a chain of stores called Gelson's, that always has them, and they're only available for a short time. They're available now, but if you get a chance, when I eat one, I literally eat the whole melon. That's how good.
Oh, but are they little, or are they like?
They're about the size of a cantaloupe.
Oh, nice. Go girl. I love that. Okay, I have my list over here because I figured there would be some like good little tips that I would need to take away from this. Yeah, so that's great, because you're getting carotenoid, you're getting beta carotene along with alpha carotene and lutein, zeaxanthin, intakes of all of those things from a big study of 18 prospective cohort studies. So studies where they follow people over time, look at what they eat and look at what diseases they get, that those carotenoids are linked to a lower risk of estrogen receptor negative breast cancer between the highest and lowest intake. So I think that's a pretty good reason. And also there was a study out of the Harvard School of Public Health, and this one is newer, and they found that, oh gosh, and I don't have the references on here, but if anyone needs the references, you just come and get me. They looked at data from the Nurses Health Study, and they looked at different subtypes of fruits and vegetables, and they found that eating more yellow and orange vegetables, right? So more than 5 servings a week as compared to less than 2, was linked to about a 9% lower risk of breast cancer. And cruciferous vegetables had about the same decrease in risk. So sweet potatoes definitely are super high in beta carotene, and it won't hurt you. Like the Institute of Medicine wants people getting around 3 to 6 milligrams of beta carotene daily, and a medium sweet potato has 14.3. So you're covered. And again, is that a concern in terms of health to have too much beta carotene from the food itself? No. From a supplement? Yes. But from the food itself, no, your body handles it just fine. So sweet potatoes. And you never know. Unlike me, you might actually get a little tiny bit of carotenoid tan. All right. So that covers the food.
To worry about though, right? Because I've heard people say, "Oh my God, I'm turning orange," but they don't have to worry.
No.
Right?
Oh no. That's great. It is. And fun fact, I want to say it's cardinals that part of what's in there that makes them red is like a show of health, that they can get enough of these brightly colored pigments in their diet that their plumage then turns, I almost said foliage, that their plumage turns a bright color. So I just like to think of that as a glow of health that you're eating all kinds of wonderful foods. So no, because I eat a lot of dark leafy greens and those are also rich in carotenoids. And I wish, I'm like, where's my carotenoid tan? I want one. All right. So this is going to wrap the food segment. Is anyone else have any current pressing questions?
Good for right now.
Okay, cool. Exercise regularly. And these are like sort of everyday, of course. Yeah, I'm supposed to, but why? Any level of physical activity, right? Even if you're just kind of like strolling, is linked to a lower risk of postmenopausal breast cancer. So if you're older, you can just go out for a walk and you're lowering your breast cancer risk. If you are premenopausal, you got to step it up a little bit statistically from the data that you need to be getting vigorous physical activity, which is also good for women after menopause. But like, it should be a little bit hard to carry on a conversation. I would not be smiling like this nice woman if I were running up the stairs like that. Let's just put it that way. This one was a big bummer to me because I did like a drink, and that's not really a thing when it comes to breast health. The less you consume, the lower your risk. And there's no level of alcohol consumption at which you're like, oh, well, this is safe, that the risk doesn't change. That's not true. There's just don't, or make it very occasional. And again, if terms of actual numbers, I'll go ahead and grab those. For premenopausal women, each glass of wine or any alcoholic beverage consumed per day increases the risk of breast cancer by about 7%. And that's dose response. So 2 glasses a day increases risk by 14% and so on. The same is true, again, like any kind of alcoholic beverage. So a bottle of beer, 12-ounce beer, 5 ounces of wine, or a shot of liquor, they all have the same effect. For older women, unfortunately, the effect is actually amplified. So for every drink, it's about twice the effect. For every drink a postmenopausal woman has, her risk per day, her risk of breast cancer increases by about 13%.
What I don't understand is alcohol is a known carcinogen. So why do doctors, I'm not saying you, pussyfoot around with the fact that it's not a health food? And any benefit you can get from it, you can get another way. And, we do that with cigarettes. There's probably benefits to cigarette because somebody with anxiety, maybe it makes them less anxious, but we don't say, well, then you should smoke. I mean, why do doctors just really come out and just say the truth about alcohol? It's a toxin. It's a carcinogen. It can cause cancer in multiple places in the body. Not just breast. Yeah. And the world, people say, oh, the World Health Organization, why don't they listen to them in this? They say they no longer recommend any amount of alcohol is safe. And I'm just so tired of people portraying it as a health food because they don't drink that much or because the kind they drink is
it's red wine, so it's fine. It's like it's red wine, so it's slightly less bad, but it's still carcinogenic. It still increases your sex hormone levels, like your estrogen levels, to unhealthy levels. It still induces DNA damage, and you still feel lousy after you drink it. So there are reasons that it's not good. I don't know if it's just because they want to make patients happy or don't want to be a bummer, but it's like, it is what it is. And people have the right to know that this is not healthy. So it's not healthy. And you're absolutely right. It increases the risk of cancer at every site from every study I've seen. The only one I saw where it's either not linked or there's a slightly decreased risk, and I still question it, was kidneys. So if you only care about your kidneys, then maybe it's okay. But every other organ in the body, like literally every other site that this analysis looked at, there was a link between alcohol intake and cancer at that site. So yeah, it's not just for breast health, but yeah, it matters.
What about gut health? It doesn't do very good.
Oh, it's
for your microbiome. I mean, people just cherry pick, the stuff they want. It's like Dr. McDougall says, people are looking for good news about their bad habits.
They are. And I confess, I do too. It's just not there.
A lot of people that are watching me are ethical vegans, and people don't realize that a majority of alcohol is not even vegan.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So a lot of the agents that they use to clarify wine, for example, they use like fish. There's some kind of fish byproduct that they use for that. So yeah, if that's your thing, please just don't. So that's a part of it. Oh, there's one more thing I was going to say about alcohol, and it escapes me. It'll come to me when it's no longer important. So we'll move on. And when it's totally unrelated, that's when it's going to come to me. Okay. So yeah, alcohol, thumbs down, but, and this is what I tacked on here. Soda, perhaps unsurprisingly, also linked to higher breast cancer risk pretty significantly. So again, let's stick to like sparkling water with a little splash of juice or like unsweetened tea. Green tea is actually linked to lower risk. So have a great cup of green tea. There are things you can do that are not alcohol. You can be high on life. It'll be so fun. Okay. Aiming for a healthy weight. I put this in here because the data is there. The nice thing is if you do steps 1 through 3, if you're eating healthy whole plant foods and you're exercising and you're avoiding alcohol, what's going to happen to your weight?
Go down.
So
it's almost as calorically dense as oil.
Oh, it is 7 calories per gram. Yeah. And oil is 9 and carbs and protein are 4. So yeah, things they make you memorize in dietitian classes. Okay. Think of it as drinking oil. That's a really good way to look at it. Thank you. I love that. I'm
like
going to use
oil, you know?
Yes. It sounds disgusting. Okay. So healthy weight. So, and again, I'm here with the full disclosure. Extra weight is linked to a higher risk of breast cancer after menopause, but counterintuitively, excess weight is linked to a lower risk of breast cancer prior to menopause. So why is this step still in here, right? If this is the case, because most breast cancer is happening in women who are after menopause. And no matter what age you are, your prognosis is worse if you have extra weight. And we also know that extra weight at midlife is linked to things like diabetes and heart disease. So for all those reasons, that is why we still recommend that everybody keep their weight in a healthy range as best they can. Again, fat cells produce estrogens, particularly postmenopausally. They become the primary source of estrogen that can drive some breast cancers. So that's one of the reasons. Also, being heavier is associated with higher levels of insulin, and leptin, so things that can drive cancer growth in some cases. So again, I'm very much of the opinion that people should not be down on themselves, because a lot of people, when they don't need to know, they know they want to lose weight, they're trying, they're struggling. Like, your body is doing awesome, amazing things for you every minute of the day. And if you're struggling to lose weight, you can just remember that if there's ever a famine or something goes seriously wrong, you will be the survivor, because you are very efficient with your calories. So you will be there when the rest of us drop off. But in the meantime, to just be kind, be good to yourself, and kind to yourself when you're going through this process. If you're struggling, especially someone who's maybe been lifelong overweight, or, and their mom was overweight too, like they've got more up against them. So just don't hate on yourself while you're going through this process. Your body is awesome at every size, but it has lower health risks associated with lower body weights for the most part, with an exception that we saw here. So that is enough on that. And then, question first though.
How long does breast cancer take to manifest? I have a very dear friend whose mother was just diagnosed with an aggressive form of stage 2. She's been following pretty much a plant-perfect diet for 10 years. But what you did before matters too, right?
It does. And that's why there are some of these critical windows in development. That's why I mentioned like the red meat intake during your preteen and teen years when your breast tissue is forming. That's a really sensitive period for carcinogens. So that one, anytime there's rapid, I don't know if it's quite as much in terms of pregnancy with that breast tissue development, but I sure know there are multiple studies on the adolescents. I feel like there was one with dairy too, but pre-adolescence and adolescence, when breast tissue was developing, that is a particularly sensitive time period. And then there's some of these things that are just, DNA flukes and mutations. They just happen sometimes. And that's why there is zero blame to go around. We're all doing the best we can here, I think. The people who are listening to this podcast, they're already they're doing the right stuff. So you can do everything right, still get that diagnosis. There's just no way to know. There's no way to know, but you can reduce your risk. So speaking of someone who might be in treatment, your diet during treatment might need to be a little different. I strongly recommend that people find an oncology specialist dietitian. They can work with you on a plant-based diet. It doesn't have to be a plant-based dietitian to work with you when you're in treatment. If you find a plant-based oncology specialist, that's even better. That would be amazing. But if you can't, any dietitian is trained to, and should, I won't say they will, but they should support you in a plant-based diet through treatment. But you would want to see someone to make sure you're getting your protein needs met. There are things that you will rarely see me say or hear me say, like, oh, maybe you need to watch your protein. But during treatment, those needs go much higher for some people on some medication regimens. So diet during treatment might be a little different, but I still think it should be as healthy as people can manage and tolerate, because that's when a healthy diet is needed the most. But again, I think if you're in treatment, see the dietitian on your treatment team, or find a plant-based dietitian. Even on the I believe it's eatright.org, find an expert. They have a tool and you can check off plant-based and cancer oncology and find someone in your area who has knowledge in those areas. Okay. Now, can I just do a little shameless plug for Let's Beat Breast Cancer?
Please. I've been posting the link and it's also in the chat and in the show notes.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I don't have to feel bad then. Okay. Hey, Let's Beat Breast Cancer. So if you want to up your game and or help spread the word for people who maybe don't know, and that's the thing that gets me. So many people don't know. You would think, especially like the alcohol, you'd think that would be everywhere. Very few women actually know, and men, I don't know about them as much, but very few of them know that that is a risk factor to drink a glass of wine. So here we go. How do we spread the word? If you haven't already, take the pledge. You pledged, all that does is you say, hey, I'm going to follow these 4 steps for 4 weeks. I'm guessing most of you out there in Chef AJ land are already doing that. So not an issue. You get this cool free e-cookbook. It's got recipes from dietitians, from doctors, from some celebrities and athletes. It's just a really yummy collection of recipes. I've made an awful lot of them in here and they have all turned out well. Obviously, they are all plant-based and predominantly whole food and good in terms of breast health. And then in October, you might want to take the challenge again because we're going to have a grand prize giveaway pack that you can enter to win. So very exciting stuff there. Like and share. We love you guys. Love us. Give us a little tiny bit of love back, right? So if you see a post, if it pops up in your feed for Let's Beat Breast Cancer, just give it a little like or share it. But even better than that is take a picture of yourself and share it with the hashtag Let's Beat Breast Cancer. We love that. We see them. We'll often reshare them and like them up. This can just be a cool meal that you put together. It can be yourself like out on a workout. You could be you drinking out of your favorite water bottle, like whatever it is. Share a picture on social, tag it with hashtag Let's Beat Breast Cancer so we can find it and give you some online love. And this year, we're actually also going to have an online summit. It's going to be celebrities and doctors and dietitians all getting together for a couple of hours to really share some cool tips. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And then, of course, I was thinking like Spaceballs, the movie. I'm like, Let's Beat Breast Cancer, the t-shirt. Okay, so here it is. If you want a t-shirt, there are actually other styles and colors, and these are surprisingly comfy t-shirts. So, that's just like an easy way. And part of the proceeds go to physicians committees so that we can spread the word even more. These are a few booklets I like. Again, this is for the Cancer Survivor's Guide on Healthy Eating for Life. Healthy Eating for Life, you can go download on the Physicians Committee website. The Cancer Survivor's Guide is by Dr. Neil Barnard and Jennifer Riley, a dietitian he worked with in the past. And that has some really cool recipes in it. Those are for people who are in the survivor phase, who are through treatment or who are looking to reduce their risk of getting cancer. And then this book, Breast, the Owner's Manual by Dr. Christy Funk. I'm a huge fan. It's not just for people, it covers everything, right? It's got a chapter for, I was just diagnosed, what do I do now? It talks about treatment options, but that's sort of in the second half. The first part's all just about, hey, I got these breasts. Like, how do I take the best possible care of them? What do I eat? And fun fact, when she was doing her research, she came to the same conclusion I did. When you start looking at the literature, as I recall, I think she took her family plant-based pretty much overnight, because once you see the data, you cannot unsee it. So that's an awesome book, whether someone just wants to take the best possible care of their breasts, or if you've had a diagnosis, it's an awesome resource. So thank you for letting me share this. And I'm delighted and honored to be here. Let me stop sharing.
Oh, thank you.
Then if there's any other questions, I'm sorry, I get to talking.
Thank you. This has just been so informative. Let's see if there's any more.
Is that what that's called? Informative.
Oh, it's been entertaining too. I'm just curious. This is totally not on the topic of breast cancer, but have you had any training like in theater? You're such a wonderful presenter, and it seems like maybe you've done some voice or something.
I have not, but I did do, as terrifying as it was, I did Toastmasters for a little while. Has anyone heard of Toastmasters? Have you heard of Toastmasters?
That's great. I recommend it for anybody that's afraid to get out and speak in front of people. It's a wonderful organization.
I was terrified. Yeah, I never got through the whole 10 speech thing. I think I got 2 speeches done, but it was an educational experience.
Right. Do you have any presence on social media if people wanted to follow you personally? Are you on any of this?
Okay. So I had a blog that I used to update a lot, and then I was overcome by events, but it's called Veggie Quest. So veggie-quest.com. And it has recipes and all kinds of cool stuff and articles. And I haven't updated it in 2 years. So, it could happen again in the future. And I think if you look up Veggie Quest on any of the social platforms, I think I am on Twitter and Facebook, and don't think I'm on Insta, but I know I'm on Twitter and Facebook. So yes, they can find me I'd like to say that the hashtag is the same for all of them, but I think I was a goofball, and I think one of them is like at veggie_quest, and the other one is at VeggieQuest. So yes, I'm around. They can follow me in that way. And one of these days, I'll actually get back to updating it.
Right. Do you ever have to get checked regularly for what you had with your breasts many years ago?
I do, yeah. So I get annual clinical breast exams, and they usually also have a sonogram, and I also get a mammogram along with all of that. So again, is there a risk to mammogram? Sure. But to me, the risk is outweighed by the benefit of finding something in an early stage.
Great. And what do you
And trying not to find anything, knock on wood. Okay.
What do you eat every day?
Oh my gosh, what do I eat every day? Okay. So this morning for breakfast, I had a big old salad with cantaloupe. I know that shocks. And what did I have? A balsamic vinegar reduction because so yummy.
Oh my God, you're getting 2 free bottles of balsamic vinegar just for
yes.
choice.
It will get used. It is one of my favorites. Let's see. And then I had oatmeal, and I threw some flaxseed in there and some blueberries on top. And I wanted a little extra sweetness. And usually I use raisins, but I got burned out on raisins. So I'm actually using a little bit of blackstrap molasses, which, yes, it's an added sugar, so it's not optimal, but it's also super duper high in iron and calcium. So that's one of those. And then because I was in a big hurry today, it was not a super optimal lunch, but it's a lunch I eat like a decent amount. It's one of the Amy's bean and rice burritos, whatever, it is what it is. A bunch of carrots and some oil-free hummus and more cantaloupe and raspberries. Normally I have a big old salad at lunch too, but I was trying to get all this together and, not sound like I had no clue what I was doing. So
Does it play a role in cancer, whether preventing it or once somebody has it?
does what?
Exercise.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes, it sure does. So if you are sedentary, your body is in a more sort of pro-cancer internal milieu. I don't know how else to put that. Exercise is great also in terms of boosting your number one protection against cancer, which is your immune system. So another fun fact is that taking care of your immune health is really important. Now I've got this Delta variant going around, and you just want to be taking care of your immune system as best you can. So there was actually a trial. I wasn't going to mention this, but I just want to put it in there now. So it was a trial done with people, healthcare workers in Europe and the United States, I think, from June to September of last year. So pre-vaccines. And what they found was that people who ate a plant-based diet had a 73% lower risk of moderate to severe COVID if they got infected. And of course, healthcare providers at that time was a relatively high risk population because they're in contact with people with COVID a lot. So I don't know if this is dramatic, but I'm all about getting the vaccine, like get the vaccine for COVID. But as we know now with Delta, like even if you're vaccinated, it's possible to get a breakthrough infection. So whatever your stance on that, eating plant-based is going to help keep you safe. But circling back to the original question, yeah, absolutely. Exercise helps in terms of boosting immune function and reducing cancer risk. We've got loads of data on that.
Right. Whatever it is in flax seeds that makes it so protective against breast cancer, is it available in any other food? And how much does a person have to consume each day?
Gracious. They are lignans is the number one, and it is available in other foods. And I want to say it's in a lot of beans as well, but I don't want to say the wrong thing. So I'm not going to make it up as much as I'm tempted to, but lignans are the biggie. And I believe it's like 1 to 2 tablespoons per day. And I can't remember the exact study that's from, but if you want an amount, that's how much I eat.
And for people that are truly allergic to soy, like I really am, and I've always.
Oh yeah, don't eat it.
But is there something in it where I could get? I'm not really worried. I don't have breast. I mean, not to say I couldn't get it. I don't have cancer in my family. Luckily. Yeah. We have a lot of other things, but not that.
We've all got something.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, is there something I should be looking for that's in soy to replace what I can't get from eating tofu, which I would love to eat if I could.
The isoflavones, I think you just stick with all the other, breast protective foods. So do you absolutely have to have the isoflavones? No, I'm pretty certain. So there are a lot of the dark green vegetables have some of the I think, I don't want to make it up. I'm like, I want to say they have some other like phytoestrogen type chemicals in it, but I don't want to say it for sure. So I'm just going to say eat all the other healthy whole plant foods, which I know you already do, and you don't need to sweat it. No, soy is not a requirement at all in terms of breast health. It's just
people shouldn't
like
fear it. The main thing is they shouldn't fear it. Like a lot of people think they're going to get man boobs, for example.
Oh my gosh, no. And it's protective against prostate cancer too. That's the thing. So it's like, I'm really, fight estrogens. And they go and eat a bowl of ice cream that's loaded up with actual estrogen and drink a thing of milk after their cheese pizza. And I'm like, oh my gosh, do you know how much actual estrogen you just consumed? A lot. All right, rant over.
I know working for PCRM, I'm sure you work really hard. Do you have time to do anything fun?
I was like, leading into October, not as much. But I do. So things I do for fun, I've got my garden outside, it's so funny. I've always wanted to garden. And when we finally pulled it together and bought a house, I was like, I need full sun. So we have a tomato plant that is cranking out some sun gold tomatoes that are unbelievably good. They're cherry tomatoes. They're so good. And when I do get time, I love to go out to the Chesapeake Bay and go beach combing and fossil hunting. It's just so nice to be by a body of water. Like that restores me. I don't know what it is about water, but oh boy, it's just a big old breath of fresh air. And to see a horizon and not a building on it, that just does it for me. Yeah.
So great. Crystal says, does stress cause breast cancer? Because my best friend was always in a lot of stress. I'm not sure if stress causes it, but I bet it can contribute to any outcome because. Yeah.
So I remember seeing, I think it was Dr. McDougall who wrote an article saying that stress actually wasn't particularly linked with breast cancer. So I'm kind of inclined to say that it's not. I would have to go back and look. The only place where I could see that being an issue is, well, a couple of things. Anecdotally, I feel like I have seen people get cancer more frequently when they're under like a major life stress. And where I could see that being an issue is from the immune function side of things, right? So major stress can interfere with immune function. And again, we're all cranking out cancer, not to freak people out, but we're all like spinning off cancer cells all the time. And our immune system goes after them and takes care of them before they're an issue. So I could see that, there'd be a link with stress, particularly on the immune side. But the problem with stress is when you're stressed, you don't need something else to stress about. So don't stress about this. My immune system's not working because I'm stressed. No, although there is some very good data for meditation, for different styles of meditation, if anyone is into that, not to get too out there, but sciencey.
I know PCRM is always doing wonderful studies. And I know that recently they did one on including soy, right? And
they did. Yeah. Hot flashes. Yep.
For hot flashes. But have they ever done any studies actually on breast cancer?
No, they haven't. I think that would be awesome. I don't know that that's in our pipeline anywhere, but I would love that. I'd also like to see some data and research on things like benign breast disease and fibrocystic disease. So things that are linked to higher risk, but are also they're just a real pain in the daily world. That's just not a fun thing to be dealing with. It's breast pain all the time. And it shouldn't be worrisome generally. Not always, sometimes it is, but generally pain is not like a primary symptom of breast cancer, but it's just disconcerting. So I would love to see that.
Cysts that aren't cancer, like you say, they can be painful. And the women that I've known that have had them, their doctors have told them no coffee, no alcohol, no chocolate. And they got better.
It helps. It sure does help. Yeah.
But those are things people love. And a lot of people love to have them every day.
Oh, I know. I still struggle. I finally given up coffee, although I do still drink some water processed decaf, which is probably not optimal, but they are going to pry it out of my cold dead hands. So that is a thing. We all have our thing. But it's, it feels better when I don't. So I don't, even though it's depressing because I did can you imagine me on caffeine though? I mean,
no, but I can imagine you on a Broadway stage. You have such, I'm not kidding. You seem like you just have such natural talent and aptitude for the arts.
You might be the only person who's ever said that, but I'm very honored. Thank you for saying that. I told my mom, she'd be like, what?
No, you have so many people, you have wonderful presentation skills and if you want to take some of my acting classes with me, I'd love to do some scenes.
You teach acting classes?
No, I don't teach them. The pandemic, I went back to what my passion which was comedy. So I take stand-up comedy and improv classes.
Oh my, are you doing stand-up right now? Anywhere?
Not this minute.
Well, I mean, clearly.
But I've been doing it on Zoom since the pandemic began. You can see it if you go to my YouTube channel, just go to the playlist of stand-up, and I've done a few sets, but improv is my first love, and I bet you'd be great at it.
Oh boy, I feel like improv would be so stressful. You're like, say something, I don't know.
No, I think you underestimate.
Maybe that'll be my next activity.
I can spot talent.
Well, I will tell my mom, who I told should be on here. I was like, Mom, I need a plant in the audience. You get on there and be like, she's amazing.
No, but listen, I know you can't see the chat now, but
I can't see anything.
See it, and the comments are that you're amazing and that you're lovely, and people.
Oh, just keep lying to me. This is so great.
Wow. Right. Oh my God. Well, thank you. Yeah, you'll have to come back.
Thank you for having me on. This was delightful.
And you are going to get, you mentioned balsamic reduction, so you're going to get to choose 2 flavors of your choice.
Ooh.
Any other wonderful people from PCRM, please send them my way. Maybe we can do a
will.
week. Like, is there an anniversary of PCRM? Is there a week that it's like your anniversary? For
Yes, but I don't know what it is right off. I will get back to you on that.
I love that you're so honest, But the thing about improv is you just make it up. You could just say, yes, it's February. Even if
it's February.
Who would know? Who would really know, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And again, if there's anyone who has any other questions, they can just track me down on social. And if I don't check right away, it's because I'm really bad about checking.
No, but you're like talking to a really smart, funny girlfriend, and infinite love and gratitude. She says, on behalf of Lee's mama, I say she's amazing.
Oh, thank you to whoever said that.
And so we can just
fantastic.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Lee. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chef AJ.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back at 2 p.m. It's in 2 hours when we have Justin Bellamy talking about vegan investing. Doesn't that sound interesting? Okay, maybe it doesn't.
I'm in. I'm like, can I talk now?
Of course you can. You are absolutely a good one. I'm going to tell Neil to give you a raise.
Yeah, love it. Listen to her.
Take care.